MLB DFS picks Thursday night, July 25th. We got two games. We have four pitchers. Let's break down each of these four pitchers. Chris Sale, Luis Severino, Ross Stripling, and Kenny Rosenberg. Go into some of the detail. Obviously, we know who everyone is going to immediately click and jam into their lineups, and that's Chris Sale compared to the rest of the field. A lot of green versus a lot of red compared against the entire Major League Baseball. A 251 xFIP, 270 ERA. These are elite. He's keeping the ball in the park. He's keeping the ball on the ground. Everything is great. The strikeouts are great. The wins are awesome. The only downside to Chris Sale is that he draws probably the toughest matchup on the slate. The Mets are great against left-handed pitching. They don't strike out a lot. They got pop. It's not the best matchup for him. That doesn't mean they're going to bash his head in, but they could scoot across enough runs to make him not the best play. And it may be smarter to save a little bit of money going with these cheaper options and getting exactly the bats that you want. That being said, again, we don't have a lot of options with bats either. You got Oakland and Los Angeles, not really super excited there. The Mets are facing Chris Sale. So it may just be the smartest, most prudent option to spend up. If we wanted to say anything about Sale, he's been remarkable just about every start. The only two starts this season where he has not performed well are the two two starts where you expect him to dominate. Miami and Oakland, two of the worst teams against left-handed pitching for whatever reason. Those games spread throughout the season were his worst starts. Everyone remembers that Oakland start. Maybe you forgot the Miami one, but every other time he has been fine, regardless of matchup. The strikeouts weren't that high in his last start, just 4, but he did limit a good hitting San Diego team to 4 hits over 5 innings. Like seemed to go a little bit deeper, but ultimately not a bad game. Probably could work on this slate. Other than that, 9 strikeouts against Arizona, 9 against San Francisco, which is a team that really does well against left-handed pitching. I wouldn't overreact to that last start on July 14th, and he hasn't pitched in, 9 days, 11 days, because he was scheduled to start Tuesday night, rain out. Scheduled to start Wednesday night, rain out. So he could be fresh. Now, he could be rusty because he isn't in the same pitching pattern. You got to kind of make your own decision on that. But you probably don't want to overthink it with just 4 pitchers on the slate. Now let's talk about some of these other guys. Luis Severino is a very interesting story. The first thing that's going to stand out the most, you just kind of really have to go back and really evaluate what Severino's doing and what the Mets are doing. The first thing, though, that jumps out at me is this BABIP, which is awfully low. And the first thing is to expect there's going to be some regression. He's been on the lucky side of balls being hit and play, but finding gloves. And you expect that to get closer to 300. And with that, more hits, more runs, etc. But that's not necessarily the case. And again, a low BABIP with a high ground ball rate, that's usually a giant red flag. We expect fly ball pitchers to have a little bit lower of a BABIP. But a ground ball pitcher with that low of a BABIP, woo. So his xFIP doesn't show up pretty good because he's not really striking anybody out that much. But again, xFIP and advanced stats don't necessarily evaluate pitchers the best way that could be. Right? It puts a high emphasis on strikeouts and walks and downgrades ground ball pitchers. They're just never going to get their fair shake with xFIP and Skills Interactive ERA. When it's all said and done, the only number that really matters is he's keeping runs off the board and winning games, and that's what he's doing. Is he pitching deeper into games? Yes, that's what he's doing. It's a different Luis Severino. When he pitched in the Yankee system, he was a fastball, slider, changeup guy. The Yankee system, with their smaller park, wanted to strike batters out. They made their pitchers strike batters out. Challenge hitters go for the Ks. He came to the Mets, and the Mets have a completely different philosophy, which is a bit on the cutting edge right now. I mean, it doesn't sound like innovative, and that innovation is we're going to throw sinkers. But when you compare that to where Major League Baseball is at the moment, there's a really good article from the New York Times sports page on this, how and why that's working. They lead the league in sinker percentage. And if you look at their pitchers, Shamanai, Jose Quintana, who was pretty much done for with the Angels after being a real hot prospect for the Charlotte Knights and then the White Sox, and then he ends up kind of washing out in the Angels. He has now reinvented himself, and all of the Mets pitchers are performing better than expected. And why? It's because of this adherence to the sinker ball. Now, why are the Mets going heavy on sinker balls? Well, here's what happened. You may remember a decade ago, everyone threw sinkers. It was the pitch. Ground balls, keep the ball in the ballpark, everything's going to work. And it was very popular. Then all of a sudden it fell out of fashion because launch angle became a big deal. Hitters were desperately trying to get under balls and get home runs. And the game turned into a long ball type of situation. And then the pitching reacted to, so you start with sinkers working. Batters adapt, start launching them over the fence. Pitchers then adapted, and fastballs, heavy movement, spin rate, strikeouts, that became what teams wanted. Case in point, the Yankees. So then batters have to adapt. Okay, we can't go down and hit sinkers all the time. Now with fastballs and heat, we have to go back up into the zone. And so now batters are again going up into the zone, changing their approach to hit more home runs, hit more extra base hits. So now the batters have adjusted. This is the New York Mets hypothesis and their new philosophy. Since batters have adjusted to hitting pitches more up in the zone with all the heat and spin rate, they then have decided we're going to be ahead of the game and we're going to go back to the sinker. So if batters are chasing these pitches upstairs and we hit them with sinkers down low, they're going to ground the ball out. And it's worked for the Mets. And it's worked for Luis Severino. It is quite remarkable. 2 years ago, his sinker was almost non-existent, a 1% pitch. Last year, 2%. Now, he throws it 27% of the time. It is one of his main pitches. And he still has solid fastball, slider, doesn't use it change as much, but his stuff is just as good as it was, maybe not as great. But now he's got another pitch that he will pull out and ground you out. And also he has changed his philosophy, saying, I'm not trying to strike people out anymore. I want to see if I can save pitches and go deeper into games. And it is exactly what he has done. He's more experienced. He's more mature. The system has worked out perfectly for him. And so with that being said, you are less worried about this 253 BABIP. He has maintained it this far. We are at the end of July. The ground balls are there. He is having a terrific season. And he's facing an Atlanta Braves team that is not very good. They're living off their old reputation. This is not the world champions. They are not studs. It's surprising that they somehow have scored enough runs that Sale can get 13 wins, but this is a matchup where, yeah, he's not going to get a lot of strikeouts, but he can go deeper into the game. And at 8,500, I think there's not very much risk here. Last start, 6 innings, just 2 hits, and he did actually get some strikeouts. I think he can get some strikeouts. Like as I mentioned before, his stuff's still pretty good. Atlanta coming out of the break, 84 WRC plus, not good. They are striking out. 93 on the year versus right-handed pitching, 24% K rate. There's not a lot of left-handed bats that you are worried about in this lineup. And if we are looking at Severino's splits against lefties, he's allowing just a 309 WOBA. Righties, 268 WOBA. Pretty much checks every box. Now, most people are probably leaning into Sale, and they don't want to play 2 pitchers from the same game. I don't mind. I think you can play 2 pitchers from the same game when we have 4 teams playing in 2 games. But how about we say a little bit about Ross Stripling? Yeah, a 1-9 record is pretty brutal. But he really hasn't been that bad this season. So one thing we pointed out with Luis was, that BABIP. Well, the reverse is true for Ross. A 359 BABIP, that is sky high. That should come down. He has been very unfortunate. He's given up a lot of hits this year. A lot of hits have fallen in. The thing that really is striking is that we expect higher BABIPs from ground ball pitchers. He's not a ground ball pitcher. He's a fly ball pitcher, so his BABIP should, on average, be 300 or lower. So at some point, there's going to be some regression. And that's also hurt his strand rate. More hits are just falling in play. Now, he's not striking out enough guys, so you're pitching more to contact, but he's also not walking batters. So he's putting the ball where he wants it. It's just the balls are falling in play. And there should be a little bit of a bounce back at some point. He's just now coming off the IL for his first start. There is concerns about him not going very deep into this game. But I believe in his last minor league start, he went 4 innings. Let me look at what I got here. So 3 Major League Baseball, minor league baseball games. He's giving up a lot of hits in those 3 starts. He's not getting Ks. So that is a concern. Same story. Not striking people out, pitching to contact. You don't really like that. Now, maybe you can get away with it against the Angels, who have a 141 ISO versus right-handed pitchers. Below average WRC plus. They're not hitting coming out of the break. Those numbers are all checking out, looking pretty good. So pitching to contact against the Angels, this may be a place where he turns it around. We mentioned the BABIP and the strand rate. Let's talk about some of the other things that he is doing well. He is giving up a lot of contact, right? But his barrel rate is extremely low. Not giving up barrels. His hard contact is down pretty low. Again, he's pitching to contact. He's getting medium to soft contact. He's really doing what he wants. It's just that the balls are going where they shouldn't be going. And it has not been very fortunate. And we saw that in his minor league starts where he's giving up more hits. But again, he's not giving up home runs. He's not giving up barrels. If you look at his fastball, grades out as the best fastball he's had during his career. And Stripling's had a pretty solid career. You wouldn't believe that from this 1-9 year, but hey, as I mentioned, I think a lot of this is just bad luck. Now you look at Los Angeles, they are one of the worst teams against fastballs. So I really think this is a place where you could consider it. Stripling is not as bad as it looks. And even if you're not going to roster Ross Stripling, with what I've just said, maybe you're going to be a little bit more hesitant to roster Angels bats. Last but not least, Kenny Rosenberg. 29 years old, not much time in the big leagues. Spent a good bit of time in the minors. Never really accumulated a lot of innings in the minors, but steadily worked his way up, and at every step had a solid ERA and pitched well. And I couldn't find any record of him having surgeries or injuries. He's not really like a soft tossing lefty. You see comparisons to Jamie Moyer, but he's just one of those old school lefties that goes out, gets through games. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him, now that he's in the majors, hang around for 5, 6, 7 years, be that back end of the rotation guy. When you look at what he's done in the minors, you look at his stuff, he's been able to make it work there. Why can't he make it work here? I would like to have seen him go deeper in games, but it is the minors, you never know. His last appearance was, 4 innings in relief, 4 hits, 1 run. Not terrible. The game before that, against the Seattle Mariners, the Angels got smoked. He entered into a game where they were already down 4-0, I believe, or 3-0 in the 4th inning. He proceeds to give up a 2-run home run, and then several innings later, a 3-run home run. Really, other than that, he still pitches 6 innings in that game. Now, he gives up 5 runs or 6 runs or whatever it was, but they were on 2 long balls. Not great, but maybe not something you want to overreact to. He's just a solid, or at least I believe he's going to be a solid back end of the rotation guy, number 5 and number 4. He's overpriced on this slate because it's 4 pitchers to choose from, but he is a lefty. Oakland strikes out a lot. Oakland does have the pop against lefties. I think Rosenberg's a guy we may consider in the future when you're on a fuller slate and he's a $5,000 pitcher and a halfway decent matchup. This is a good matchup for strikeouts, although he's not really a strikeout guy. I would rather take Rosenberg in a game against a team that may not strike out a lot, but doesn't score runs and has a lower WOBA, a lower ISO. Probably a little too much pop in this lineup for us, and that's probably where people will go in terms of Oakland bats. And I don't mind that. But as far as pitching goes, really intrigued by Severino and what he's done. But again, at the end of the day, we're chasing Ks, and you may lean into Sale. But again, I like that Mets lineup against lefties. I might ultimately go Severino and Ross Stripling. But again, the concern with Stripling is how deep will they let him go? And we are banking on the law of averages evening out at some point. This may not be the day in his first start back where he finally starts to get lucky again. Pitching to contact could be dangerous, but against the Angels, maybe it works. Maybe at the end of the day, we're just trying to pick the pitcher that doesn't blow up. So who has the highest probability of having a bad day? I would argue Rosenberg is likely to be the guy that either has the worst chance of having a bad day in terms of just getting blown up. Could also argue that he has the highest probability of having a bad day just by not going deep enough and allowing fantasy points to be scored. So if we were to calculate who's the most likely to score the least amount of points, I'd say Rosenberg's number one. Number two is probably going to be Ross Stripling, just because we are betting on that regression coming. It hasn't come yet. He is 1-9 with a 5.82 ERA. On top of that, he is making his first start. Didn't really go that deep in his minor league starts. So how is he going to score fantasy points? Even if he has a good day, is he going to go deep enough to score fantasy points? And then at the same time, still it's a 359 BABIP. And I know it's the Angels, but that's that. The next, I would argue, in terms of just like having a disappointing day. So who disappoints? Rosenberg, Stripling. Who's number 3 to disappoint? I would say Chris Sale, just based on the matchup. And maybe the extra day's rest aren't helping him. And I think ultimately the guy that's least likely to fail is Severino. Now, we're not necessarily looking for the guy that's least likely to fail, but there it is. If you want to look at upside, then it's obviously going to be Chris Sale based on the strikeout potential. Great pitcher, should overcome good hitters. Upside second would be Severino. Then I would argue Ross Stripling, clearly because of the matchup. I like to pretend that Kenny Rosenberg can go out there and strike out a bunch of athletics. Now, this last start here, 4 innings pitched, 4 hits, 3 strikeouts, that was against the Oakland Athletics. But I really wouldn't fault anyone for considering any of the pitchers on the slate. But I think that pretty much sums up where you'd like to be, where you need to go. Thanks for joining me. Leave a like, subscribe, share. Have a fun summer.